Some stories don't just scare you, they haunt you. And tonight, you're not just getting one, but four chilling tales, each darker and more unsettling than the last. If you're doing some work right now, skip this video and come back later, because once you start listening, you won't dare to get up from your bed. Put on your headphones, lie down, and let yourself sink into the darkness, because these stories will feel like they're happening to you. Let's dive in.
Our first story comes from India. My name's Vikram, and I've been a truck driver for years. What I'm about to tell you is real. These memories still haunt me, and I can picture every detail as if it happened yesterday. It was back in 2019. I had a logistics assignment to haul goods from Visakhapatnam to Vijayawada, and then from Vijayawada to Chennai. If you know those highways, you know they're dangerous at night. Long stretches of forest, endless fields, and miles of complete emptiness. Truckers avoid those routes after dark, and usually I do too, but that night, I had no choice. The road was empty, the darkness suffocating, and the only thing keeping me company were my headlights cutting through the black. 2 hours into the drive, I approached a pedestrian bridge. From far away, I thought I saw a figure standing up there. Probably just my imagination. But as I got closer, my headlights caught something. Or someone. A woman. She stood completely still on the bridge. No expression, no movement, just staring directly at my truck. I passed under the bridge, eyes glued to her the entire time. When I checked my side mirror, my stomach dropped. She was still watching me, her head slowly turning to follow as I drove away. There was no reason anyone should be standing there, not in that place. That part of the road had been abandoned for years, yet she was there. Hours later, exhausted, I pulled into a truck rest stop, one of those emergency pull-offs built on steep roads. I parked, shut off the engine, and climbed into the sleeper cab to get some rest. At first, it was silent. Too silent. I shut the curtains, trying to ignore the unease in my gut, and forced myself to sleep. Then it started. Knock. 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 3 sharp knocks on the driver's door. Silence. Then again. Knock. 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 My body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. Finally, I worked up the courage to peek through the curtain. And there she was. The same woman, standing outside my truck, pale, lifeless, her eyes locked directly on mine. Panic shot through me. I scrambled to the driver's seat and jammed the key into the ignition. Thank God the engine roared to life. My headlights lit her up, but she didn't move. She just stood there, still as stone, staring. I pressed the gas, forcing the truck forward. As I passed right in front of her, she tilted her head and gave me the longest, creepiest smile I've ever seen. I floored it. I didn't stop for hours, not until I finally saw signs of life again. But that night, I swear to you, I saw something that wasn't human. Our second story is from Malaysia. as narrated. Back in 2018, I was working for a shipping company in Penang. My name's Daniel, and I was one of those drivers who handled long-haul deliveries across Malaysia. Most of my trips were boring, just long stretches of road, music on low volume, and plenty of coffee to stay awake. But one night, I got an assignment that changed how I looked at driving forever. The delivery route? Penang to Kuala Lumpur. That meant I had to take the infamous Perak Highway, a road every Malaysian driver has heard about, but most avoid after dark. I'd heard whispers about it before. Truckers swapping stories at diners, taxi drivers lowering their voices whenever the highway came up. Some claimed they'd seen a child wandering alone at night. Others talked about cars that disappeared into thin air. But me? I didn't put much stock in ghost tales. I just thought it was jungle folklore. That night, I left at 11:30 p.m. so I could beat the morning traffic. By midnight, I was in the thick of the highway. Endless black forest pressing against both sides, the air heavy with mist. The only sound was the rumble of my truck's engine. Then, I saw something. A boy, standing barefoot on the shoulder of the road. His clothes looked torn, his head slightly tilted as though he'd been waiting for someone. I hit the brakes hard. My first thought was, a missing child? An accident? I leaned over, rolled down the passenger side window, and called out. No response. His face was turned away, like he didn't even hear me. Just then, a silver Proton Saga sped past me, the driver honking like crazy. He shouted something in Malay I couldn't catch, but his expression, wide eyes, teeth clenched, looked like he was warning me. By the time I looked back at the boy, the road was empty. I kept driving, trying to convince myself it was fatigue playing tricks, but the deeper I went into the jungle, the stranger things got. The truck's headlights started to dim, the dashboard flickered, and then I noticed headlights behind me. A car. Small, old, yellow. Its beams locked on me, tailing me no matter how fast I went. I sped up, 80, 90, even 100, but the car stuck like glue. When I glanced in the mirror again, my stomach dropped. There was no driver, no one in the front seat, just an empty vehicle racing after me. I swerved hard around a curve, and in that instant, the yellow car vanished. Not slowed down, not turned off the road, just disappeared into the night. I was shaking, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I told myself, make it to a rest stop. Just make it until you see lights. Finally, after miles of darkness, I spotted a lay-by. Small, deserted, just one flickering street lamp. I pulled over, shut off the engine, and tried to breathe. That's when I heard it. A knock. Soft, deliberate, on the passenger side window. I froze, slowly turned my head, and there he was. Again. The boy. His face inches from the glass. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear a sound. I blinked, and the window fogged up as if he was breathing against it. I didn't wait. My hands scrambled for the ignition, the truck roared back to life, and I slammed the pedal to the floor. This time, I didn't look in the mirrors. Didn't stop until the first faint glow of dawn touched the horizon. When I reached Kuala Lumpur, I parked the truck, got out, and just stood there, letting my legs stop shaking. Other drivers saw my face and didn't even ask. They just nodded, like they already knew. And maybe they did, because after that night, every driver I spoke to had a Karak story. Some saw the yellow car, some saw the boy, A few saw things they refused to describe at all. Me? I never drove that highway at night again. And I don't plan to. Ever. Moving to our third story from America. A couple of months ago, I was catching up with my buddy Chris Miller over coffee. We've been friends since high school, and he's not the type to make things up. Chris is straightforward. If he says something happened, you can bet he believes it. That night, he leaned in and said, "Man, I've got to tell you what happened to my family last summer in South Dakota. I still get chills just thinking about it." So here's what Chris told me. The Millers, Chris, his wife Jessica, and their two kids, Emily, 12, and Jake, 9, decided to take a road trip through the Black Hills National Forest. They rented a cabin through one of those online sites. The pictures looked nice enough. Wooden walls, a stone fireplace, plenty of hiking trails nearby. Exactly the kind of rustic getaway they wanted. The first day was normal. They grilled burgers outside, went for a short hike, and played cards on the porch until dark. But on the second night, things started getting strange. Jessica was the first to notice. Around midnight, she woke Chris up. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. He listened, half asleep, and sure enough, there was a faint scratching sound on the outside wall of the cabin. At first, he thought it might be a branch brushing in the wind, but when he stepped outside with a flashlight, the trees were too far away. And the scratching? It stopped the moment he opened the door. Back inside, Jessica, she swore she'd also heard footsteps, light ones, almost like a child, circling the cabin. Chris brushed it off. Probably animals. We're in the middle of the woods. But the next day, while Emily and Jake were playing near the tree line, Emily shouted for her dad. She'd found something carved into one of the trees. Chris jogged over and saw it himself. Deep grooves forming the word "stay." The cuts looked fresh. Too fresh. That night, the family couldn't shake the unease. Jessica insisted on keeping a lantern on in the living room. Around 2 a.m., Emily screamed from her bedroom. Chris ran in and found her pointing at the window. Tiny handprints covered the glass, dozens of them. But when Chris opened the door and shined his flashlight, the ground outside was empty. No footprints in the dirt. The family didn't sleep after that. They all sat together in the living room waiting for sunrise. That's when the scratching came back. Only this time, it wasn't on the walls. It was on the cabin door. A slow, dragging scrape. Then silence. Then 2 hard knocks. Chris grabbed the fire poker and stood by the door, heart pounding, but he didn't open it. The knocks came again. 3 times this time, deliberate. Jessica begged him not to check, so he didn't. When the first gray light of morning broke, Chris finally opened the door. Nothing was there, except one thing. On the porch, in the dust, someone had drawn a circle, and inside the circle were 4 stick figures. A tall one, a slightly shorter one, and 2 small ones. Just like his family. That was enough. They packed up within the hour and drove straight back to Rapid City, handing the cabin keys back without explanation. Chris told me he never even left a review. He didn't want anyone else asking about that place. He swears that whatever was out there wasn't some prankster. It felt targeted, personal. And honestly, the way he looked at me while telling the story, I believe him.
Moving to our 4th story. This story happened to my cousin Daniel Harper. He lives up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and he's a truck mechanic, straight shooter,
The kind of guy who rolls his eyes at ghost stories. But what he told me about one summer night driving along Route 66, he still swears on it to this day. Daniel was on a late drive across northern Arizona. The desert stretched out for miles, empty and silent. Just past midnight, with his gas running low, he spotted a flickering neon sign for a motel just off the highway. The lot was deserted. The building looked decades old, like it hadn't been updated since the 60s. But the sign buzzed faintly. Vacancy. Inside, the lobby smelled like mildew and stale smoke. Behind the front desk sat an old man in a faded uniform. His hair was slicked back, too neat for the setting, and he spoke barely above a whisper. He slid Daniel a brass key labeled Room 7. As Daniel turned to leave, he asked, half joking, "Got Wi-Fi here?" The man smiled strangely. "Don't worry, you'll be connected." That answer stuck with him. Room 7 was down a long, damp, carpeted hall. The room itself was tidy, though dated. Floral wallpaper, an old tube TV, and a bed with a stiff mattress wrapped in plastic under the sheets. He tried to sleep, but at around 2 a.m., 3 sharp knocks rattled the door. Daniel froze. He checked the peephole. Nobody was there. The parking lot was empty, bathed in a sickly yellow glow. He climbed back into bed, and that's when the TV flicked on. Static filled the screen. He reached for the remote, but then the static cleared, replaced by a grainy black and white feed. It was the hallway outside his room. The camera was aimed directly at his door. Daniel's chest tightened. He stared at the screen, and then he saw it. Something tall, something shadowy, moving down the hall toward Room 7, his room. That was enough. He grabbed his keys, sprinted out without even packing, and bolted for the lobby. But the old man at the desk was gone. His chair sat empty, rocking slightly as though someone had just gotten up. Outside, Daniel saw something else that made his blood run cold. Fresh tire marks crisscrossing the dusty parking lot. Dozens of them, and yet not a single car in sight. He floored it back onto the highway and didn't stop until the sun came up. At a gas station in Winslow, he told the clerk what happened. The man just frowned and said, "That motel, it burned down over 20 years ago. Nobody stayed there since." To this day, whenever I see Daniel, I notice how his hands shake when he talks about it. He doesn't scare easy, but he always says the same thing. Whatever he saw in that hallway wasn't alive. So these were our stories. Thank you for listening all the way through. Rest easy, stay safe, and may your night be peaceful.